Hello and welcome to episode 213 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, as always, joined by Evan Silva, and the NFL is back, baby. I know this because bombshell news is dropping left and right. Injuries, criminal cases, holdouts, the drama in the NFL, it never ends. Evan, back from the bachelor party. How are you, buddy?
Doing great. Jumped right into the change log, got everything up to date based on the latest news, made a ton of adjustments, and we're going to get into all of them right now.
Yeah, and it's not just small adjustments. I mean, these are adjustments at the top of the draft board that the news is impacting. We did the two podcasts last week on the fallout from the Cam Akers injury, the fallout from the Michael Thomas injury. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Michael Thomas stuff here because we haven't had Evan's take on it yet, but we're also going to talk about the Packers stuff, some Cowboys stuff, Giants stuff, Cardinals stuff, even a small trade between the Bears and the Texans. Lots to get to. Before we get into it, wanted to remind everyone that all these rankings that we're talking about and Silva's tiers for drafting are always updating and available as part of our draft kit, which is just $34.99. I think it should be roughly $134.99, but Evan has one. It is just $34.99. Head to EstablishTheRun.com for details there. Also want to remind everyone this show is indeed brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. Best way to get ready for your season-long draft and for DFS season is to be in the real money, best ball streets. Underdog for sure has the best platform. If you have our draft kit, you get up to $35 for free on Underdog. Head to the best ball tab for details. Even if you already have an Underdog account, you will get $10. Take their money. Free money. Okay, Evan, you have had some time to digest all this news. You have had time to hashtag adjust the ranks. The big news was Aaron Rodgers officially returning to the Green Bay Packers. And hopefully you've been listening to us on here the last few weeks, listening to the Market Mondays podcast, because we have been pounding the idea of getting ahead of this, because now ADPs are going to go absolutely through the roof. Evan has moved Aaron Rodgers up to QB8 from QB10. So now Aaron Rodgers is ahead of Tom Brady, ahead of Jalen Hurts. Davante Adams up to wide receiver 3, behind only Tyreek Hill and Steph Diggs. Aaron Jones up to RB5 and 6th overall. Big Bob Tunyon up to tight end 8. AJ Dillon up to RB 39. All big moves for the Packers. I think it's obvious, Evan, how big an impact this has. We were hedging a little bit before. In recent weeks, we started to reduce some of the risk on Aaron Rodgers not coming back and starting to kind of gas it so that people would start getting more Packers in drafts. But now that Rodgers is back, how did you think about moving all these guys around in your rankings?
Yeah, big adjustments for a number of Packers players. Aaron Rodgers is now neck and neck with Russell Wilson and Justin Herbert as the quarterback 6, Russell Wilson quarterback 7, Justin Herbert quarterback 8, Aaron Rodgers. I did this adjustment when Aaron Rodgers had not yet officially reported. It was just being reported that he would report. Today he did officially report. So I may move Aaron Rodgers ahead of Russell Wilson and Justin Herbert today. But that's the little range where he is now in with Davante Adams. He is now in that bunch tier with Tyreek Hill, and Calvin Ridley is now behind him. DeAndre Hopkins, I moved down to wide receiver 5. Robert Tonyan moved all the way from tight end 13 to tight end 8. He's still in sort of the same tier. He actually didn't move tiers. He just moved from the bottom of the tier up to the top of the tier. And then Aaron Jones, I think, is a guy that we're going to continually discuss. I mean, right now I have him in the middle of the first round. You know, we're pulling Jamal Williams out of the offense, moving the number 2 running back position onto AJ Dillon, who is a potential threat at the goal line for Aaron Jones. But number one, AJ Dillon is probably not going to be nearly the receiving threat that, or AJ Dillon is not going to be nearly the receiving threat that Jamal Williams was to Aaron Jones. And at the end of the day, are the Packers really going to pull their best, most versatile running back off the field in scoring position in favor of AJ Dillon, which kind of limits their offense at the goal line and makes it more condensed and more bunched? I mean, because they will throw – I mean, Aaron Jones had one of the highest totals among running backs in terms of red zone targets last year. Are they going to change their offense in that way? I'm a little bit skeptical of that. But yeah, those were the major changes. And I need to look a little bit more into, and we should talk about this. Should I move Amari Rodgers into the top 150? Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Allen Lazard, those guys obviously get bumps up. I don't know if necessarily we should move them into the top 150, but they're a lot more interesting now, obviously, with Aaron Rodgers rather than Jordan Love potentially starting.
Let me start with this. Aaron Rodgers was outrageous last year. I mean, you could say that he was the best player in the entire NFL, 48 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. So, even thinking that Aaron Rodgers isn't going to regress some off of that is just foolish thinking. And the 2 previous years before that, only 26 touchdowns, only 25 touchdowns. I mean, Aaron Rodgers did not throw for a ton of yards last year, only 4,299. Weaponry behind Davante Adams is a problem. I do like Big Bob Tonyan. Obviously love Davante Adams. Absolutely love Aaron Jones. The whole MVS, Lazard, Amari Rodgers thing is still really, really thin. So I think that I would have no problem if people were still taking Russ Wilson and Justin Herbert over Aaron Rodgers. I understand the excitement about Aaron Rodgers coming back. I think Russ and Herbert have just as good of floor ceiling combos. You could make a case that Herbert's floor is lower because the sample size on him being successful in the NFL is so much lower. But yeah, I don't want to go overboard here on Aaron Rodgers. I think he's going to play just like he did last season. Dude's been like having sex in Hawaii and who else knows what he's been doing for this entire offseason. So yeah, that was just one thing I wanted to point out on Aaron Rodgers. Last year was just such an outrageous year for him. Yeah,
he absolutely played with his hair on fire. He could not have been more efficient. In the previous 2 years, he was the quarterback 9 and the quarterback 7. So that's really where he's ranked right now. I do think that last year he made a decision that he was going to play a little bit less, a little bit more within the structure of Matt LaFleur's offense, and that in part contributed to because his rise in efficiency, because he was more of like a gunslinger and out of structure playmaker. That's what he had really evolved into over the previous 3-4 years. Greg Cosell talked a lot about that. And it kind of to a detriment of his on-field production. But then last year he decided that, hey, we're going to kind of meet in the middle with Matt LaFleur. And I would expect that to continue, but as you mentioned, there's probably going to be some regression there.
I like taking wide receiver in round 1 in certain spots where we have so many questions about running back. How would you match up now Tyreek Hill versus Davante versus Diggs? I believe you have them in similar tiers or the same tier, but these guys, Ridley, Davante Adams, Steph Diggs, Tyreek Hill, how would you slot Davante Adams and think about it if you wanted to go wide receiver in round 1, thinking about those guys?
Yeah, they're all now first round picks. They're all, I believe, within the top 11 overall in the top 150. And I mean, they're tough to sort. I thought about putting Davante Adams at number 1 over Tyreek Hill. I thought about putting him at number 2 over Stephon Diggs. But, the big playability, the narrow target distribution in Kansas City, betting on Patrick Mahomes to have a better season than Aaron Rodgers, I think gives Tyreek Hill the edge. And then with Stephon Diggs, just the ability of Stephon Diggs to just jump in pretty much cold with very little practice time with Josh Allen, do what he did last year, lead the NFL in catches and receiving yards. And now they're entering number 2 with the full offseason and the full, August to prepare. And the youth, a little bit on the side of Stephon Diggs there, has me leaning toward Stephon Diggs over Davante Adams right now. But again, all 3 of these guys are within the top 11 now in the top 150.
Yeah, and I like the idea of Big Bob Tonyan being up there in the top of his tier for sure. Last thing I want to say is Aaron Jones. You mentioned it a little bit, but man, I mean, if you're looking for a running back in round 1 without workload concerns, without injury concerns, Aaron Jones, I mean, man, and I like AJ Dillon too. You moved AJ Dillon up to RB 39. I've been taking AJ Dillon a ton in rounds 10 and 11 of best ball. I think that Aaron Jones now is a round 1 pick. I don't know if he'll go like that yet. People are kind of going to be anchored a bit to his round 2 selection. So we'll see what happens to Aaron Jones ADP. I think for now we'll be ahead of Aaron Jones ADP, and I like that for sure.
Yeah. And one thing to note when you are drafting AJ Dillon now is that, if something were to happen to Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon all of a sudden becomes a potential league winner. Yeah. So that makes A.J. Dillon a lot more attractive. In addition to the fact that now he can be a guy that potentially provides you with some some standalone value, and as like a potential flex option each week. It would be very tied to touchdowns, and he'd be a very volatile scorer, even in a best case scenario with Aaron Jones healthy. But now he's got a little bit of a floor and, a very high ceiling if something were to happen to Aaron Jones.
Do you want to give the people a quick scouting report on Amari Rodgers? Just in general, do you think he has a path to beat out MVS or Lazard for number 2 or number 3 duties, or do you think it's just going to be kind of a gadgety role for Amari Rodgers?
Well, I think that the player that they sort of envisioned when they drafted Amari Rodgers was Randall Cobb. And we have heard rumors from Trey Wingo, who is not a reporter, so you got to kind of take what he says with a grain of salt. Nothing against Trey Wingo, but, he's like a sports personality. Mm-hmm. That Aaron Rodgers is pulling for the Packers to trade for Randall Cobb. And if that were to happen, that would not help Amari Rodgers. Yeah. So I'm trying to temper my expectations for Amari Rodgers, but I think that he would fit well as a slot player. Allen Lazard has also been a high percentage slot player for the Packers over the past couple years. So a Randall Cobb addition would hurt him. And if Amari Rodgers comes along quickly, that also would hurt Allen Lazard.
I mean, this is so absurd. Like, first he got upset when Jake Kumaro, they let Jake Kumaro go. And now he's demanding that they trade for Randall Cobb, who I think has looked really kind of slowed down and also has an awful contract right now. He wants him to trade for Randall Cobb. I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay. Let's move on to the Michael Thomas stuff. We talked about this. I talked about this last week with Herzig, but I want to get your take on it because you're much lower on Michael Thomas than what we discussed last week. You dropped Michael Thomas from the wide receiver 10 to wide receiver 62 following news that he had ankle surgery in June on his troublesome ankle. We're currently projecting to be back around week 7 or week 8. What we don't know, and what I was kind of arguing with Herzig about some, was we don't know how healthy he'll be if he does return in that week 7 or 8 spot. So this is a massive move, though, down to wide receiver 62. Essentially what you're saying is he's a borderline undraftable. So talk to the people about why you're so low on Michael Thomas now.
So it very much depends upon league format. If you're in best ball, I think that Michael Thomas is still very draftable. If you are in a league, if you're in a managed league, season-long league, where you have an IR spot, then Michael Thomas is a lot more draftable. But if you're in a traditional season-long league, which most people are, that's by far the highest percentage league format in fantasy football still. I think he's really, really tough to draft. You're not going to get him. He's going to begin the season on reserve PUP, it appears. And those first waiver runs are really important typically in the managed leagues. And having a guy occupying a roster spot for the entire first 6 weeks the expectation that he'll be back in week 7, but no true guarantees that he'll be back in week 7 can be really harmful to the end of your bench. Mm-hmm. So it really depends upon your league structure, how you value Michael Thomas. But right now, he would not be someone that I would be looking to draft pretty much at all in a traditional season-long management league.
I agree with you. I think the pushback is that in season-long managed leagues, some of these leagues, like 4 or 6 teams make the playoffs, and then all the money is there once you make the playoffs. So if you can squeeze in the playoffs and then insert someone like Michael Thomas, who we can project for like a 25 to 30% target share, if he's right, that would be a big boost to your playoff run. Obviously, you need to get there. But depending on your league format, like Evan said, if you have a deep bench and maybe 6 teams out of 12 make the playoffs or something, there's more merit to holding Michael Thomas or trying to hold him through the whole time. My bigger concern is that when he comes back, this ankle's been bothering him for a long time. My bigger concern is when he comes back is A, he won't be in shape. B, the ankle may not be right. C, it could be Taysom Hill at quarterback. Like, there's a lot of issues that you could have with him beyond just clogging up a roster spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he's also, although he is a plus size receiver, he really runs a lot of short area routes. He does a ton of his damage in the slot. He primarily plays outside, but he gets almost as many catches in the slot as he does on the perimeter. So, I think that with the short area movement that he relies upon, having an ankle injury, a long-standing ankle injury at this point, can really work against him. And that effectiveness, is that going to be there? And when he returns, and the Taysom Hill factor, it could be ugly in the second half of the season, even if he's out there playing.
And this offense could already be cratered. And that's what I want to get to you about, where I think we disagree, is on this Tre'Quan Smith move that you made from wide receiver 59 to wide receiver 37. I don't think Tre'Quan Smith is equipped, and I like Tre'Quan. I don't think he's equipped to be a number one wide receiver in the NFL. I don't think he's equipped, especially if Taysom Hill is back there, to be number one wide receiver in the NFL. So there's no chance that I would be taking Tre'Quan Smith over really good NFL receivers like Brandon Ayuk, Antonio Brown, Deebo Samuel, Devontae Parker, Laviska Shenault, Galladay, Juju, Sutton, Judy. Like, to me, Tre'Quan Smith is nowhere near those guys. I'm not even sure that the Saints think that Tre'Quan Smith is ready for this. We've seen games last year that Michael Thomas missed where it was like Deontay Harris popped up for 10 targets and they got Marquez Callaway involved a bunch. They had little Jordan Humphrey and Juwan Johnson. I'm not even convinced that Tre'Quan is going to see 5, 6, 7 targets per game or a big target share. Then we can layer in all the Taysom Hill risk as well. So I would not have moved Tre'Quan Smith up a ton at all. But yeah, you feel free to disagree and obviously argue your point here, Tre'Quan up to wide receiver 37.
Well, as wide receiver 37, I mean, he's not even ranked as, top 36 as a wide receiver 3. He's like a wide receiver 3/4. And I think that that's kind of where he belongs. I might back off him a little bit. But I think that he's right now the favorite for targets in the offense behind Alvin Kamara. Mm-hmm. And, just from a target share perspective, I think that he belongs in that wide receiver 3-4 range. But yeah, I mean, we could talk about him and how he compares to like Tyler Boyd, who I put him ahead of. And Tyler Boyd, I think, has a chance at like 90 catches. Does Tre'Quan Smith have that in his range of outcomes? I'm not sure. I think that that's a fair point. And I might reevaluate that today.
Okay, we're going to change it to Levitan's top 150 soon as Tre'Quan Smith gets knocked down. Talk to people about Marquez Callaway and Deontay Harris and Juwan Johnson and Lil Jordan Humphrey. Like, I don't know if these guys are really NFL wide receivers, but they have a big opportunity in front of them now. Is there any of those guys that you would consider even drafting?
Yeah, Marquez Callaway late, and I moved him up into the top 150 as the wide receiver 60. He's got pretty good size. He's about 6'1", 6'2", 205. Didn't run great coming out. He ran 4.55. But if you look at his other athletic measurables, he's a really good athlete. He had a 38-inch vertical. He had a really explosive broad jump as well. If you go back and look at his production at Tennessee, he was a big play threat. At Tennessee, he averaged over 21 yards per reception his final season in college. And he came in last year. He didn't have a big yards per reception last year, but he did have some moments where he flashed. And I think that he is the favorite right now to be the Saints' number 2 receiver until Michael Thomas returns. Not necessarily a priority guy to draft, but I mean, he became, I think, a lot more interesting just based on he's going to get a lot more playing time in the first half of the season.
For sure. Let's talk about the running backs here for a second. To me, and what I talked to Herzig about was one of the biggest winners, if not the biggest winner of this injury to me, was Latavius Murray. They are going to be way more run heavy. They're going to need Alvin Kamara split wide a lot more. And I think Latavius Murray actually has a chance to have his role expanded and be effective. I mean, you could make a case Latavius Murray is the second most talented offensive player on the Saints right now behind only Alvin Kamara. And so I like Latavius Murray moving him up. You have Kamara now at RB4, getting passed up by Zeke, which we'll talk about in a second here. But any thoughts on moving Latavius up and any further thoughts on Kamara with the more likelihood now that Taysom's going to start?
Yeah, I mean, Kamara got a little bit of a bump down just because I moved up Zeke. And then, we talked about this on a previous show, and you were pretty adamant that you would prefer Aaron Jones with Aaron Rodgers back over Alvin Kamara. Yeah. And I was just looking at the rankings last night and thinking, how can I make that, a part of the top 150? So this is still a little bit of a work in progress. I don't want to be too overreactionary or too underreactionary on the fallout from what these big changes and news and notes, that are occurring early in training camp, the fallout from them. But, yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit – I love the offensive line. I love the Saints offensive line. I think they might have the best offensive line in the league. They're returning all 5 starters. That really works in favor of Latavius Murray. But, again, how good is this offense going to be? Are they going to get a lot of short yardage chances at the goal line? Alvin Kamara happens to be a pretty damn good goal line running back, in and of himself. So,
and so is Taysom Hill. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And Latavius Murray. So I don't know. It's still a work in progress for sure.
I think the risk is that we see the Saints offense run like the Patriots offense last year. Really good offensive line, really good coaching, rushing quarterback, try to be creative and win games that way. The problem is that's just a disaster for fantasy. We saw the Patriots guys. I mean, they were basically unusable for most of the year, where the Patriots guys, I am concerned that the Saints offense, while they might be able to sustain and win some games, is not going to be fantasy friendly at all. And that's why I'm low on Alvin Kamara, just a complete cratering of the offense as they turn into a mess here.
And by the way, we were early on the Saints being like a team to bet against making the playoffs, to bet their under on their win total, and feeling a little bit better about those bets now with Michael Thomas out of commission until at least week 7.
Last guy I got to ask you about is Adam Trautman. You only moved him up one spot from tight end 16 to tight end 15. He's ahead of Gronk now. I, of course, took the infamous air ball from Adam Trautman in DFS last year. Lost about a Kia on that. He's forever on my hate list. But anyways, Adam Trautman moved up one spot. What do you think about him now? Because a lot of people are saying, well, look, Adam Trautman could be the number one option. He could be an option above Tre'Quan Smith even.
Yeah, and he's I moved him up because I think that there could be, and I was already decently high on Adam Trautman, but now there could be more reliance on him as a guy that they need to get the ball to in the middle of the field. He's a good athlete. We know he's going to be out there a lot because he can block, but then it becomes a matter of, how many routes is he going to run? His route total, his route percentage wasn't very high last year, but now you're pulling, Jared Cook out of the offense. Josh Hill is gone. Might they add another tight end? That's a possibility as well. But I like where we have him. I mean, he is a breakout candidate, but he is, still a clear-cut tight end too. And I think that's where he belongs right now. He only saw 16 targets last year. He did catch 15 of them. He was a big-time producer at Dayton in college as a receiving tight end. Comes into the league, immediately as a proficient blocker. I don't know. The potential is there for him to be a true every down tight end. That's where his upside comes from. But again, what exactly is going to be his role in the offense? It remains to be seen.
Yeah, I certainly prefer Evan Ingram, and I think you can make a case for a guy like the Ferk Daddy, Anthony Ferkser, right there with Trautman as well. I know some people prefer Blake Jarwin over Trautman, and we're watching Blake Jarwin's health closely as we get to camp here. That transitions us to the Cowboys, where you have moved Dak Prescott into the top tier at quarterback. Dak Prescott now healthy, fully participating in training camp. Dak Prescott is in that top tier with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, truly elite tier. Dak doesn't have quite the same rushing capability as those guys. I guess Dak's rushing is probably on par with Patrick Mahomes, but certainly not the same as Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. You're going to need a lot of passing stats from Dak Prescott for him to match those guys. Why make the move to bring Dak into the top tier here with these other elite rushing, throwing quarterbacks?
Well, I think that's where he belongs when he's healthy. And he reported to training camp, avoided the active PUP list to begin camp. I thought that was really promising. I know Jerry Jones is the king of hyperbole, but he, said that Dak Prescott came in and had the best practice he'd ever seen on the first day of camp. The receiver, I know Amari Cooper came in. He did land on the active PUP list, but it sounds like his injury is not a big concern. They're bringing back, a slew of offensive linemen whose seasons were ruined by injuries. And at the end of the day, like Dak Prescott can be the quarterback of a top 3 offense. And I do think he's going to have a big passing year.
Yeah, and you can get Dak significantly later, or at least moderately later than those other guys that I just mentioned. Certainly way later than Patrick Mahomes. A couple other small Cowboys moved Zeke up to RB3 from RB4, passing Alvin Kamara. I don't get into these puff piece off season weight loss things, but we like when running backs lose weight. And Zeke is down to 218 pounds, he says, the lowest he's been since 2013. Certainly looks like he's in much better shape this year. So, Zeke's workload in this offense, we've talked plenty about Tony Pollard and how we think that his role when Zeke is healthy is a bit overstated right now. I like being high on Zeke. Very few question marks on Zeke relative to some of these other round 1 running backs. So again, you now have him third, Tyreek Hill fourth, Alvin Kamara fifth overall in the top 150. Any quick comment on moving Zeke up a little bit?
Well, we had seen those social media posts that indicated that Zeke was really taking his offseason conditioning seriously. And then when he reports in like tip-top condition, we received confirmation that he had been really putting in time and effort to show up to training camp in shape, not just let training camp, the practices from training camp spur his conditioning. So yeah. I like the dedication that Ezekiel Elliott has shown. I love the situation. I think he has a chance to score a lot of touchdowns this year.
You flipped CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. You mentioned Amari Cooper starting training camp on the active PUP. In other words, he can come off at any time and begin practicing. Amari Cooper had ankle surgery way back in January. This is not a Michael Thomas situation where he waited to have surgery until June. Amari Cooper had ankle surgery way back in January. Amari Cooper's ADP is obviously going to dip, especially with the hype around CeeDee Lamb right now. CeeDee Lamb, who almost exclusively played slot last year, now is getting moved all over the formation. I'm not too worried about Amari Cooper's ankle. The Cowboys don't seem worried at all. It seemed like the plan the whole time was to let him sit out these first couple weeks. So if there's an ADP downgrade in Amari Cooper and he starts going 6, 7, 10 picks later than CeeDee Lamb, I think Amari Cooper will be a really, really good pick. But you flipped them, but you've left them pretty close together. You're on the clock now. You prefer Lamb over Cooper, but again, we could see the ADP gap really widen.
Yeah, and the fact that CeeDee Lamb was almost strictly a slot receiver last year, now they're moving him around the formation, letting him play outside a little more. That's going to contribute positively to his playing time because he was only about a 65% player last year. And I think now he has a chance to be like an 80% player in their offense, expecting a year 2 leap from CeeDee Lamb. Great run after catch, really high percentage weapon in a great offense. These are the kind of picks I really, really like. High floor, high upside selections, and CeeDee Lamb now essentially taking over for where Michael Thomas was. Michael Thomas was previously the wide receiver 10. Now CeeDee Lamb is the wide receiver 10. Didn't move Amari Cooper down necessarily. And if you remember a couple of years ago, he missed almost all of training camp with a plantar fasciitis concern. People were worried about him. He wound up being fine entering the season. I think he's going to be fine. And we're still ahead of ADP on him at wide receiver 11.
By the way, I have like 30 something season long prop bets that I've taken right now. You can find them all on the site. And I've taken maybe like 3 or 4 overs only out of that 30 something. CeeDee Lamb over 1,000 yards was one of the ones that I did take. So big time rooting for CeeDee Lamb this year. We talked about Saquon plenty last time. Just wanted to make another note here. Saquon is down to RB8 in your top 150. You previously had him as RB4. I mean, we've been talking about this way back since Jordan Ronan came on the podcast and talked about how he thought and he was hearing that Saquon would be eased back in. So hopefully you guys were ahead of this move. I expected him to be eased in, but still, let's say he only gets 15 touches in week 1. Is that really the end of the world? So I think there's some more risk here that maybe it's more serious than they're letting on. My gut instinct though is still they're trying to undersell Saquon's health so that it looks like, he's more of a hero when he comes back. There's no reason to let everybody know that he's healthy right now, et cetera, et cetera. I think that he's healthier than what they're letting on right now, but I agree with you that there's some risk. And in round 1, the opportunity cost is so high. I don't mind if people want to pass. But yeah, you have him down to RB8 right now. You're on the clock. How are you thinking about Saquon when you're at pick like 7, 8, 9 right now?
Yeah, I mean, he's not a comfortable pick right now. And I think he does belong right now at the end of the first round. Maybe if we start to get some more positive reports as training camp progresses, he'll move up. He'll start to inch back up the rankings. But right now, I think he belongs really on the first, second round fringe. And it's not just the injury. It is also the offensive environment. They didn't do a whole lot to address their offensive line. They're bringing back Jason Garrett. There was never any thought, it seemed like, for them to, look into a more progressive offensive coordinator. And when you combine those two risk factors, the injury and the offensive and the potentially negative offensive environment, I think he's risky enough that's where he belongs is at the 1-2 turn.
Yeah. Okay. This DeAndre Hopkins thing, I don't. You moved DeAndre Hopkins from wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 4 behind Calvin Ridley. Obviously, not a big deal. I prefer Calvin Ridley, anyways. But I did want to talk about the COVID stuff because I think, obviously, if someone is unvaccinated, they're at risk of missing more games. To be clear on the rules, if a vaccinated player this year tests positive, he can clear protocol with 2 negative tests 24 hours apart. Immediately rejoin the team after that. But if an unvaccinated player tests positive, he must sit out for 10 days. So unvaccinated players, you're running risk that they're going to miss 10 full days. If they're vaccinated, they can come back in 24 hours, 48 hours, and rejoin the team right away. So yes, there is a lot more risk in drafting unvaccinated players. That said, DeAndre Hopkins said, well, I didn't know if I was going to get it. Is he going to update us when he gets it? I have no idea. I have no idea if guys are lying, if guys haven't come public. We don't know. Calvin Ridley never said anything about it. We don't know if he's unvaccinated or vaccinated. So my concern with adjusting the rankings for this vaccinated, unvaccinated stuff is I just don't know. I don't know if their coaches convinced them to get it, if they got pissed off with all the protocols and they went and just got the vaccine. I have no idea. So I don't love adjusting the rankings for it. That said, I agree with you that Ridley should be ahead of DeAndre Hopkins anyways. But yeah, that's just my take on the vaccinated, unvaccinated stuff right now. I'm not sure how much of that played into you moving Hopkins behind Ridley or not.
Yeah, I mean, it did. And I'm not going to make a habit, or I'm going to try to not make a habit of adjusting players, based on this factor. But, when you're on the clock and you are in position to, you're staring at these guys, Davante Adams, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins. Why wouldn't you take Calvin Ridley or Davante Adams ahead of DeAndre Hopkins when you don't have this concern? Sure. And they're so close anyways. I think you just go with the player that you think presents less risk and still maintains that big time upside to finish as the number 1 overall receiver in fantasy. And so that's why the move was made.
Yeah, I will say for props, I am baking in a little bit of the COVID vaccine stuff because, like when things are close in projection, I'm just like, it's under is just such a strong bet. And so I have under bets on guys like Cole Beasley and DeAndre Hopkins and T.Y. Hilton already. It's just one more reason to be on unders if you think one positive test and they miss 10 days immediately. All right, a couple more small things before we get out of here. Anthony Miller was traded to Houston. And I do want to talk about Deshaun Watson stuff also. But anyways, first on the Chicago side, you moved Darnell Mooney from wide receiver 56 to wide receiver 48. I mean, Darnell Mooney got a lot of air yards last year. He did not capitalize on those air yards whatsoever. Could have been due to quarterback play. Certainly could have been. And maybe they'll get better quarterback play this year. But yeah, these empty air yards guys like Denzel Mims and Darnell Mooney, I hear you. I like it. I like it in theory. I don't know if Darnell Mooney can do it in practicality, but I like the idea of it. I know a lot of sharp people are definitely on Darnell Mooney. Talk to the people a little bit about him and moving him up.
Well, I think that what happened here is that with Anthony Miller out of the picture, it solidified Darnell Mooney as the clear-cut number 2 receiver behind Allen Robinson. Anthony Miller was a slot receiver, and I think now Allen Robinson is going to play more in the slot where he's been really, really good. And Matt Nagy has shown a willingness to move him into the slot and use him in mismatched situations. And Darnell Mooney is going to, again, collect a ton of air yards. And hopefully Justin Fields could get in there. One of the best attributes that Justin Fields showed at Ohio State is that he could throw the deep ball. That he was accurate throwing the deep ball. And Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles were not accurate throwing the deep ball. And Justin Fields has a chance to be a really good vertical passer. And so I think that hopefully some of those empty air yards are now not as empty. And Darnell Mooney is like an upside wide receiver 4 now.
Okay. Deshaun Watson stuff. So look, man, I find it, given what Roger Goodell has done, and again, the commissioner's exempt list was designed to allow the commissioner to basically have all this power, even if a guy is not convicted, even if he just has accusations, pending charges. Basically, Goodell can do whatever he wants. So Deshaun Watson has over 20 civil charges pending against him. There have been 10 women who have gone to the police and filed complaints. There are no criminal charges yet. I find it hard to believe that Deshaun Watson won't end up on the commissioner's exempt list, aka suspension, for a reasonable amount of time, if not most or all of the season. But there's no word on that yet. And so a lot of people are talking about Deshaun Watson now. What if he only gets suspended for 3 games? What if it's only 6 games? What if he gets traded to the Eagles and he doesn't get suspended at all? And all this stuff is at least in play now. I still think the likeliest outcome is a trade to the Eagles and a very lengthy suspension, 10, 12, some games, a lot of games. I still think that's the likeliest outcome. The trade to the Eagles just makes so much sense. I don't think he's going to end up starting week 1 for the Texans. But some people at ETR have been pushing us to move Deshaun Watson up just in the chance that he comes back and plays 10 games. And I understand Deshaun Watson's one of the best players in the NFL. I just don't know about holding a roster spot for Deshaun Watson at a position that's so deep. So I don't believe you have Deshaun Watson in your top 150 yet. I also would not have Deshaun Watson in my top 150, but have you thought about it at all? And how are you thinking about the Deshaun Watson situation?
Oh yeah, I think about it all the time, but there's just a complete lack of clarity. And so I have made no movement, no adjustments, but it's something that I will reevaluate today and probably every day until we do receive some clarity. But I have no idea what's going to happen here.
Yeah, and I think moving him up so people in 2 QB leagues can at least get him and stash
That's
him
fair.
makes sense. In single QB leagues, I think it's a different story where we can get guys off the waiver wire. I mean, I won a season-long league last year just by getting Jalen Hurts off the waiver wire, and like things like that are going to happen at the onesie positions for sure. Last thing we're going to talk about here, Joe Burrow. I mean, I'm so in on this Bengals offense. I'm actually worried about it. But man, Joe Burrow, healthy, not even on PUP list as he comes off the ACL. He is into your 4th tier of quarterbacks. And you also move Jamar Chase and T. Higgins into the 4th tier of wide receivers. I mean, this team was playing so fast, was playing so throw-centric before Joe Burrow's injury. And now they add Jamar Chase to the mix. It's just totally wheels up, I think, for Joe Burrow. But go ahead on moving him up into the 4th tier.
Yeah, and so it could be, a situation where you're getting the best of many worlds because you have a coach that's willing to throw at a very high rate in Zach Taylor. You have a coach that's willing to play fast, and you have a team that's going to be playing from behind a lot. So if everything clicks here, I mean, this absolutely can be a fantasy bonanza. I love that Joe Burrow avoided the active PUP list to begin training camp, and he's already practicing. These two young receivers, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I mean, I moved them up as well. Didn't move them up a ton in terms of ranking, just a couple spots in terms of ranking, but moved them from the 5th tier to the 4th tier among wide receivers. And I think that Tyler Boyd, I just submitted the Bengals fantasy preview when I was writing him up. I mean, he could be a PPR machine as well. And he's the non-sexy pick of the 3 receivers. But, there's no tight end here. I don't think CJ Uzoma or Drew Sample is going to command a very heavy target share. So I think it's a situation where it's a sneaky narrow target distribution. And then and so I think that all 3 of these guys can be weekly factors, and more than factors in fantasy football. And with a healthy Joe Burrow, that added confidence to my outlooks for his receiver core, which again, and even Tyler Boyd is young. I mean, he's only 26 years old.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely wheels up for this Bengals passing game.
I have by far my most common stack in best ball is Bengals stacks. I also have Joe Burrow over 4,050 yards. I also have Joe Burrow 34 to 1 to lead the NFL in passing yards. So yeah, I absolutely love the Bengals and this passing game this year. Hope it works out. We'll actually have, I know the big concern is the offensive line for a lot of people. Brandon will be on the podcast August 5th in conjunction with the release of his rankings to talk about Bengals offensive line and all offensive lines as well. Stay tuned for that. All right. We've said it all. Be sure to check out Silva's constantly updating top 150. Again, it's in the draft kit, which is just $34.99. We will be back on the next episode to go player by player through round 2. I know many of you enjoyed our round by one player by player breakdown. We'll be back to do round 2 on the next episode. Also Friday, we will have Matt Harmon on to do some deep dives on wide receiver evaluation. Stay tuned for all that. Hall of Fame game, man. 1 week from Thursday, first preseason game, showdown season. If you guys are subscribed to our preseason DFS product, Cody put up a really good article using historical data to figure out what we need to do in showdown slates to win those in preseason. Really counterintuitive and different from what we would do in the regular season. Check that out as well. 4, producer Luke. 4, Evan. For Jerry, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.